On Business Incorporated today. The International Monetary Fund fails to update data on Ethiopia's economic recovery for 2022. The OPEC Fund for International Development signs $25 million loan agreements with the governments of Benin and Togo. Coal and iron ore stockpiles in South Africa rise on rail bottlenecks. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Well, we'll start as usual with market numbers here in Africa, where sentiments were mostly positive at intraday. Nigeria's NGX was in the green. The index was up 0.07%. South Africa's GSE index also rose higher, almost 0.8%. Meanwhile, Egypt and Kenya closed Thursday's trading sessions sideways. The EGX 30 was down 0.56%, while the Nairobi Stock Exchange closed higher at 0.59%. We move to the Middle East now, where major indexes closed Thursday's trading session mostly in the green also. The Abu Dhabi main index was down yesterday, 0.15%, while Dubai's index surged 1.39%. Elsewhere in the region, Saudi Arabia and Qatar indexes closed Thursday's sessions positive. They were up 0.3% and 0.13%. European stocks advanced today as fears over the Chinese property market cooled while investors monitored some of the happenings. We have Christy joining us now to give us details of what's going on in Europe. Hello, Christy. Good afternoon.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Good to have you. Happy Friday. Well, Germany's factory order figures for October came out today. Industrial production has been hard hit in recent months by global supply chain issues. What do the latest numbers reveal?
Yes, you're exactly right about the supply chain issues, and what the new numbers out today showed is that factory orders really have deteriorated here in Germany. I should mention we also saw a similar phenomenon taking place in France. Those numbers were out today as well. So what we saw is manufacturers reporting severe delays, which are causing them in some cases to have to postpone or even cancel orders. The numbers from IHS Markits, according to their analysts, showed that the supply chain issues have really escalated in nature, whereas before the real issue was high prices of raw materials for manufacturers. Now they're actually having a hard time even getting their hands on the raw materials. So this is, of course, hitting their production, making it difficult to fulfill orders, and some manufacturers are seeing contracts canceled. So these numbers also, or out with the numbers, was also an analysis showing that business activity in Germany in October was the lowest it's been in 8 months. They described economic activity here as we start the fourth quarter as plateauing, and we also, some of the momentum we've seen returning to the services sector is slowing down, they said. So all in all, not a very good indicator, at least on the manufacturing scene in Germany this month.
Well, yesterday, Russian president said that if Germany issues an operating permit for the controversial Nord Stream 2 Baltic Sea pipeline, his country could start providing natural gas to Europe with as early as the very next day. And energy prices are still high in Europe. How likely is the regulatory approval at this point? How likely is it to scale through?
Right. Well, there's certainly a lot of pressure on European and German politicians to do something about these high prices that you mentioned. There is, however, still a lot of resistance, at least politically here in Germany. We spoke about earlier this week the fact that the Green Party had once again come out against this pipeline. They are likely to play a part in Germany's next government. The coalition talks are ongoing to form the next government right now, and they came out this week saying that they are still against this pipeline, pipeline as they've always been. But yes, where is Europe supposed to get energy now that the colder months are really starting to set in? They're basically already here. What Gazprom, the Russian energy giant that runs this pipeline, said on Monday actually is that this pipeline is made up of 2 lines, and one line is already filled with gas. The second one can be filled with gas by mid-December. And then, as you said, Russian President Vladimir Putin said yesterday that basically, if the regulators approved the pipeline today, was his wording, so today, Friday, they could have the gas flowing by tomorrow. So obviously a very enticing deal for Europeans. Now, regulators have until early January to decide whether they will approve the pipeline. At the moment, approval does look likely to go through. But that being said, we shouldn't forget about past examples of pipelines not being approved. The Keystone XL pipeline was all but a sure thing in the U.S., and then we saw a federal government change there, and that project was canceled. So it's certainly not a sure thing yet.
All right, but very enticing, like you noted. And now, Chinese real estate giants Evergrande narrowly avoided default today by making an overdue interest payment. Now, their fears global markets will be rocked if the company were to collapse. How did the European markets react to this?
Yeah, great question. Investors here in Europe were certainly quite relieved for this news out of China that we got earlier today. We did see European stocks rising on the news. Yeah, there is really a lot of different factors going on for markets right now, a lot to pay attention to. We have fears of inflation. We have these supply chain issues that we're just speaking out, and now we have Evergrande. So the fact that Evergrande came through with this interest payment today was a big relief for investors. There's still a lot of debate about what a collapse of that company could mean. Some say it would be a major hit to the Chinese economy to the extent that it would also bleed out into the international markets as well. So this was at least a sign that initially things seemed to be under control. We saw this gain for European stocks. We also were seeing gains due to continued positive performance from corporate earnings, particularly among consumer goods companies that we saw today. So with everything going on, there's a lot to be concerned about, but all in all, European stocks are trading around, or I should say the European markets are around a 6-week high today. So it seems there is some optimism in the air today.
All right, Christy, thank you so much for the updates and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, you too.
So let's move to the UK now. And in the UK this morning, we talked about retail sales falling for the 5th time this year. Well, Juliana is standing by to give us more on that and, of course, other stories. Hello, Juliana. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Inni.
So how is the market reacting to those retail figures we talked about earlier?
Yeah, there's been 2 key pieces of data that is going to be lots of food for thought for next week's budget, a highly anticipated budget that will be delivered by the Chancellor Rishi Sunak. One is inflation data, fell marginally from 3.2% in August to 3.1% in September. And secondly, it's this retail sales figure that was released early this morning, showing for the 5th consecutive month, retail sales are falling. It fell 0.6% in August, fell 0.2% in September. Some economists had actually priced in it rising 0.5%. And so it does go to show that consumer confidence here in this country is waning. We spoke yesterday, Inni, about Unilever hiking their prices up 4.2%. They're not the only big firm to do it, but they're the biggest firm to go on record saying that they're going to be doing it, because some of the supply chain constraints and the labour shortages are hitting their bottom line, so much so that they believe it's got to trickle down to the consumer. And we are starting to see this sentiment in the data. So there are concerns. This hasn't trickled into the market after a big sell-off at the beginning of the week. The FTSE All-Share is going to be going into the weekend in the green. The All-Share is up at intraday by 0.36%. The FTSE 100 is up by 0.41%, and the FTSE 250 is up by 0.19%. In the currencies market, the British pound is up on the US dollar by 0.06%, though down on the euro by 0.08% and down on the Japanese yen by 0.14%, as you were just discussing in Frankfurt. A massive sigh of relief by global investors that Evergrande just managed to pay this interest debt payment. And also much closer to home, even though there are rising COVID cases in it, I think some investors are hoping that the government suggesting that they're not going to take any restrictive measures thus far is enough to get them through this weekend at the very least.
I believe so. Well, the landlords are saying that they will give every UK household £320 this winter. What's this about?
Yeah, this is an interesting story, small but significant. The party conference season is just beginning to wrap up. We had Labour, then we had, of course, the Conservative ruling party, and now it's a time of the smaller parties, one of them being the Green Party, small but very, very mighty. They only have one seat in Parliament, but, you know, considering that Boris Johnson is really trying to push with this clean, green economy, the Green Party are having a significant role in the future of Britain, and they've just been doing their party conference. They have two party leaders at the moment. Not one of them has a seat in Parliament, though, I might add, Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey, and they've been talking about what Britain would look like if they were in power, and one which is likely to be a controversial a scheme that they said they'll roll out is a 1% levy that they will charge to landlords. So these are people who own a significant amount of land, so not necessarily the house, because you can own a house in this country, but not the land it sits on. But if you own a piece of land, then you pay 1% on that land. This is, according to them, going to generate about £9.6 billion. And rather than keeping it in their coffers, they say what they would do is they would provide each and every single family who are on the breadline in the UK a couple of £100 during the winter to get them through a really difficult time. And it is quite an outlandish statement, but it's very, very important, because lots of charities and certainly the opposition Labour Party have been talking about a fuel poverty or fuel scarcity, fuel meaning the kind of gas and electricity you would use to heat your homes. We know the universal credit hike was scrapped. Lots of people going into shelters and food banks to try and get food, and they think by charging you know, the very rich to give to the very poor will be enough to get people through the coldest times. And some people will certainly agree with them, though they don't have the power to make those changes, Annie.
Yeah, well, if wishes were horses. Well, thank you so much, Juliana, and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, Annie.
So let's move to the U.S. now, where stock features were muted in early morning trading after disappointing earnings reports from technology companies. Dow Jones Industrial Average Features gained 6 points. S&P 500 features and NASDAQ 100 features both traded in mildly negative territory. Well, to give us some details of how the market went yesterday, we have Maria Bird, our correspondent in the United States.
Stock market was mixed on Thursday, but the S&P 500 had an all-time high day as it increased to 0.3%. The NASDAQ also saw increases on Thursday with a 0.6% increase. Netflix and Tesla allowed the NASDAQ to see this type of growth. It is clear that the Dow Jones had quite a bit of a dip on Thursday, but is expected to bounce back. Investors are hopeful as jobless claims are the lowest they've been since the pandemic era. It is clear that the supply chain is also having an impact on goods, but investors are not allowing them to deter them from the future earnings and potential of the U.S. stock market.
And from the U.S., we head to Asia, where markets were mixed on Friday as shares of China Evergrande Group surged in Hong Kong following media reports that the embattled developer is set to pay off, has already paid off on payment on a dollar-dominated bond. The broader Hang Seng index in the city gained about 0.4%. Mainland Chinese stocks closed mixed with the Shanghai Composite falling 0.34%, while the Shenzhen Component climbed 0.33%. At the same time, Japan's Nikkei 225 rose 0.34% to close, while the Topix Index gained about 0.1% to finish the trading day. Meanwhile, Australian stocks were muted as the S&P AX 200 closed flat. Take a break now. When we come back, we'll head to the African continent. To stay with us is Business Incorporated on Channels Television. You're welcome back. You're still watching Business Incorporated on Channels Television. Let's go to Ethiopia now, where the International Monetary Fund has failed to update data on Ethiopia's economic recovery for 2022. Now, this is a rare move reserved for war-torn countries and failed states that's causing uncertainty within the business community as well as investors. While the IMF has made no explicit reference to the Tigray War, analysts say that the ongoing conflict is the most likely reason why the multilateral lender has withheld its predictions for Ethiopia's economic recovery in 2022. So investors are already uncertain about Ethiopia, but what are the other likely impacts? We have international financial analyst Opelua Dako Thomas bearing his mind on this. Hello, Opelua. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
So this obviously doesn't give good signals to investors and businesses in Ethiopia.
Yes, it doesn't give a good signal. What it presents is risk. And now the risk has just heightened because basically as an investor, from an investment standpoint, if I'm coming in with foreign exchange and foreign capital, and I'm not seeing any data forecast, then how do I invest in that country? There's no way I'm going to invest in that country. And you know that basically before the pandemic and before the Tigray war that we're going through, Ethiopia has been growing steadily, average 10% every year since 2010 to 2019, and this is data from World Bank. But then again, we had the pandemic, and no one is going to invest in a country where we can't get projections. Projections came out for different countries, and you've rightly said that this is basically for war-torn countries. Other countries that don't have this sort of data are Afghanistan, Syria, and Libya. So what does this mean for Ethiopia, and what does this mean for potential Ethiopian investors? They're just going to say, no, I'm not bringing my money in. There's no way I'm going to invest, because IMF really has been, what I call them, the big uncle in the economic world, where they're trying to monitor and oversee international financial stability and monetary cooperation among different countries. So for them not to bring out data is typically what I call it, an economic vote of no confidence, and there's no way investment is going to come into the country.
So just to be sure, does it mean they don't have the data, or they just don't want to share it? You know, what does it say? I know the IMF hasn't given reason for this, but what picture does it paint? Does it paint that they didn't bother trying to get the forecast, or yeah, they want to give a signal out there, and that's why they have refused to share it? Well,
I mean, one thing about data forecast, one thing we have to look at is accuracy. There's no way you can make an accurate data analysis if you're not really sure what's going to happen. Because now we've seen in the back of the last year, different coups in different African countries. So you can't give a projection and someone's going to make an investment on that projection you've given. Like I said, IMF is a dominant institution. If I'm going to invest, I'm going to look at what IMF has said. So they don't want to give a green light or a green signal and say, okay, we are, I mean, the data are quite important. There's real GDP, current account balance, and unemployment with current consumer prices. So these things are very, very, very suspect to any sort of volatility. And when there's no political stability, there's no way you can make these projections. And this war has been going on for a year. So with a pandemic and a war, there's no way you're going to make any projections for the next year. So this basically is the problem here. So from your view now, how much damage has the Tigray War caused to businesses in Ethiopia? Well, it's a very, 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 very important question. It's a lot of damage. The government has spent millions and almost billions of dollars trying to defeat the Tigrayan Liberation Front. So, like I said earlier, no one is going to invest in a community where, in a country where the government is focusing on crime, where the government is causing war crimes, humanitarian crisis here. And in the area of Tigray now, we've seen that They have torn off the banking systems. They've torn off electricity. There's basically no communications in that area. 5 million people live in Tigray. 2 million people are fed. 400,000 people are having famine problems. So at the end of the day, you're looking at these numbers, and it shows that it's going to get worse. And this is, like I said, this fight has been on for a year. There's really no end in sight. We are looking at UN and US. US recently said they're going to issue sanctions. So I mean, we know what sanctions does to different countries. Look at Venezuela, look at Syria, look at Libya, look at Iran. So sanctions is a bad thing. And if you are saying that we're going to bring sanctions, it's going to be a very, very difficult situation for Ethiopian people.
And how is this likely to disrupt the recovery on the bloc, the MENA, the Middle East and North Africa bloc?
Well, in terms of weightings, Ethiopia's economy does not weigh so much on MENA. I mean, MENA is, there are over 19 countries in the MENA region, the Middle East and the North African region. And you have Saudi Arabia, you have United Arab Emirates, you've got Egypt. Those are big countries there. So, I mean, IMF brought out the projections and says, okay, for this year, right now, what we are seeing is 4.0%. But we're seeing that the source of improvement, 4.1%. And also going forward in 2022, they've seen that, okay, the economic recovery is going on fine in this region from 3.7 to 4%. So the Ethiopia thing is, how would I put it? It's light scale in terms of what goes on in the whole big picture. Saudi Arabia, oil prices are high, so the economy is going fast. There's a lot of vaccine rollout, different monetary measures. Saudi Arabia is doing, UAE is doing, Egypt as well. So it just does not affect anything. It's quite light in that region. But in the small picture and in the grand scheme of things, Ethiopia will actually miss out on any good dividends coming out from that area.
All right. Thank you so much, Okoluwa Dakpo Thomas, international financial analyst, for sharing your thoughts with us on Ethiopia this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
So moving on now, the OPEC Fund for International Development has signed loan agreements with governments of Benin, giving them $15 million, and Togo $10 million to support the regional program for the integration of agricultural market. The program's objective is to strengthen the agriculture and trade sectors to sustainably increase the income and food security of rural households. Specifically, the funds will help finance the rehabilitation of a total of 9 semi-wholesale markets, 19 produce collection centers, and 500 kilometers of rural access road sections connecting the production areas to the market. Additionally, 4,000 hectares of agricultural land will be developed for sustainable irrigation management, enabling family farmers to increase their production and resilience to climate change. The OPEC Fund has supported projects aimed at boosting socio-economic development in Benin and Togo for more than 40 years, co-financing projects such as transport, energy, water supply, agriculture sectors, among others. Coal and iron ore stockpiles in South Africa are rising on rail bottleneck. Transnet's failing rail network has also hit coal export. Kumba Iron Ore Limited struggle in getting supplies to port is further highlighting the constraints in South Africa facing in export key commodities, including coal. The continent's top iron ore producer said that its premium steel-making material is being held up at mines in South Africa's Northern Cape province because of rail bottlenecks, which may force it to slow output as stockpiles rise. The logistical issues are also affecting the movement of coal, which contributed to prices hitting a record high, major exporter Thungela Resources reveals. Israel is considering a $200 million project that will connect its natural gas grid with an Egyptian grid in an attempt to boost the Jewish state's energy exports. Israel and Egypt are in talks to build a new overland pipeline to boost Israel's gas exports to its neighbor. The pipeline will run from Israel to Egyptian border on the Sinai Peninsula and will be operated by Israel Natural Gas Lines, a government-owned operation. That's it on the program for the week. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm Ini John Mekwa.